friends, welcome back to my channel, and today in this video we are going to study about lethal genes. So what are lethal genes? Lethal genes are the genes or the mutant that decreases the survival of organism. The word lethal means the gene that decreases the survival of any organism. Now the Mendel's experiment was tried by L. Cunot on mice, and the character he chose was a coat color yellow and white. Now for the F1 generation, we need a parent 1 and a parent 2. A parent 1 should be a homozygous dominant type and the another parent should be of homozygous recessive type. Now what he observed was he was unable to get this genotype in nature. He was unable to get this genotype in nature. So until he get the genotype of capital Y, he will not get the F1 generation of capital Y small I. So he was unable to conduct his experiment. Then he thought, try to find out the mouse of F1 generation directly, having the genotype of capital Y small I, because until we will have the genotype of capital Y small y in F1 generation, we won't get the F2 generation and we will not land up with the phenotypic ratio of 3:1. So to get the phenotypic ratio of 3:1, we need F1 generation with genotype capital Y small y. But because in nature he was unable to get this capital Y, so he tried searching for a mouse having the genotype capital Y small y. Now he started his experiment from the heterozygous capital Y small y, giving the yellow color to get the F2 ratio. Now what is the expected outcome? The expected outcome is this capital Y and this capital Y. This is 1. This capital Y and the small y, 1. This small y with capital Y, that is again the capital Y small y, that is plus 1. And this small y and small y, that is 1. So the genotypic ratio is 1:2:1. But because the capital Y is a dominant allele, so the phenotypic ratio will be 3:1. This is the expected outcome, as Mendel received this outcome by working on pea plant. So he also expected the same outcome when he was working on mice. But the observed outcome was this capital Y was absent. This mouse was found to be dead or absent from the experiment result. He only obtained capital Y and small y. So the genotypic ratio he obtained was 2:1, because this 1:2:1, this 1 is for dominant capital Y. So this was missing. So the genotypic ratio became 2:1. Phenotypic ratio also became 2:1, because in 3:1, the third one, that is because of capital Y was missing. So he observed the changed phenotypic and genotypic ratio because of the absence of mouse having the genotype capital Y. Now, why law of segregation did not work on this particular character coat color in mice? Because of lethal genes. Because capital Y is a lethal gene, so the presence of capital Y is not allowing the survival of organism. Now the next question arises, if Y is a dominant lethal gene, then capital Y small y genotype should also die. But here we are saying that capital Y and small y is surviving, only capital Y is unable to survive. So if Y is a dominant lethal gene, then this genotype should have also been died, because we know that dominant allele only express itself. So that means this is a case of lethal gene and pseudoallele. What do we mean by pseudoallele? I already made one video on pseudoallele. I will provide the link at the end of this video for those who have not seen that video. For now, in short, what are pseudoalleles? Pseudoalleles means these are two separate genes. For example, gene A and gene B. When two genes are very tightly linked, and because of which they are transmitted into next generation together only, we think that these are alleles. It becomes difficult for us to differentiate between two genes when both the genes are so tightly packed that they are transmitting to the next generation together only. So such two different genes are known as pseudoalleles, because they are behaving as the alleles of a gene, but actually they are two separate genes. So we call it as a pseudoallele. So this is a case of lethal gene and pseudoallele where Y is not actually a lethal gene. Y is only responsible for coat color. There is a separate gene for the lethality, and both these genes are very tightly linked together. Capital Y is linked with the lethal gene, small y is linked with the normal alternative of this lethal gene. So now if we see capital Y and AL, because capital Y is linked with this allele, lethal allele or lethal gene. So this mouse or mice will die. Capital Y, small I. So one lethal gene, one normal gene. It is surviving. Yellow color because of this capital Y. So capital Y is only giving the coat color. It is not influencing the survival of an organism. That is getting influenced by another gene which is known as lethal gene denoted by AL. And this gene is very tightly linked with this capital Y. Similarly again capital Y, small y, AL and AN, yellow and surviving. Capital small y is linked with normal genes, so white, and they are surviving. So from here, what we can conclude, if you see here, that here we are having lethal gene also, normal gene also. And the phenotype getting expressed is the normal one because the mice were survived. So that means one conclusion is the normal gene is dominant over the lethal gene. And second is the coat color and this lethal gene. These are pseudoalleles. These are very tightly linked together. So what are lethal genes? These leads to the death under particular condition. The death can happen prior to birth, just after birth, prior to puberty, or after reproductive stage. Now these lethal genes can be dominant type or recessive type. In case of dominant type, even one single allele is sufficient to cause death. And when death happens after reproductive stage, then only this particular dominant allele can pass to the next generation. Otherwise, it won't be able to pass into the next generation because that individual or that organism is died before the reproduction only. So before reproduction, if any organism is dying, so definitely the gene won't pass to the next generation. So in case of dominant allele, the gene will only pass to the next generation if that particular organism has crossed the reproduction stage. In case of recessive lethal gene, both the alleles are required to cause death and it works as a carrier and hence it passed to the next generation. So that's all for today's video. If you found the video informative, please do like, share and subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon for the next video notification. Till then, stay safe, stay happy.